That is the Ashtavakra Samhita.
Namaskar and good evening. Welcome to this session of In Conversations with Hingori Sutras. In our endeavor to help spread knowledge, we have come up with the concept of a spiritual laboratories on our website hingorisutras.com, where we put in a lot of videos. There are books, blogs, podcasts available. Would request you to please log on in your free time and please make use of this thing that we've put up together for you. And today, on a session on the philosophy of Ashtavakra, Ashtavakra said, "Boundless as space am I, and the phenomenal world is like a jar. This is knowledge. So it has neither to be renounced nor accepted or destroyed. I am like the ocean and the universe is like the wave. This is knowledge. So it has neither to be renounced nor accepted nor destroyed. I am like mother of pearl and the illusion of the universe is like silver. This is knowledge. So it has neither to be renounced nor accepted or destroyed. I am indeed in all beings and all beings are in me. This is knowledge. So it has neither to be renounced nor accepted nor destroyed." As profound as it may sound, understanding this from a point of our individual identity is near impossible. Today, I request you, dear audience, to open up your mind and welcome, absorb, and reflect on this brilliant treasure of philosophy, that which is Ashtavakra Samhita. We have with us today a member of our team, Devraj Khare, who will help us understand and internalize this profound knowledge with a prayer that we too experience what is known as bliss. Devraj, can you hear me?
Hello. Good evening, Anjali.
Hi, Devraj. Good evening.
I think, before we start on this whole journey with Ashtavakra, I'd like to share with you as to how I got into actually into reading this book, which is known as the Ashtavakra Samhita. Let me show it to you all. Can you see this?
Yes, Devraj. Yep.
So, I think for all of us who have gathered here, it's very interesting and inspiring to actually realize the depth of this book exactly in the manner in which you said, but also to understand how it's meant to come to us just like everything else at a given point of time. So, the story is like this. A few years back, I had gone to meet my guru. And, when I met him, at that point of time, he was sitting somewhere and there were piles and piles of books in the midst of that room. And they were books in all subjects like management, spirituality, maybe some doctrines on religion. And he told me he's giving these books to people to read so that, they can get some insight, some input, some knowledge. And he asked me to pick up any book that I wish to and take it back with me to read. So, at that point of time, I was, the first thought that came in my mind is that I should ensure I pick up the right book. It was more a game of impression management. And, I kept going through all the titles. I mean, so many titles. And I was looking for the fattest book and biggest volume and the most fancy title, so that I make the right impression upon him. And somewhere he would have looked through my impression management game, and he gave this book to me. And he said, "Here, take this, and why don't you read this?" And in that moment, I was completely disillusioned. I felt that, when I looked at this book, and it was such a pocket book, I felt I would end up reading it in an hour. I thought possibly he didn't consider me much of a reader. And I said, what am I going to do with this book, and what am I going to learn from it? And believe me, for the next 6 months to a year, I didn't even look at this book. I mean, not literally, but I just couldn't get myself to reading it. Until one day, luckily I realized that when the guru gives you a task, or when the guru gives you a guidance to do something, I don't think it is correct not to do it. And that's what made me pick up this book the first time. And believe me, Anjali, the first time it was a breeze. I got through this book in less than a day. I mean, it's got understanding in Sanskrit, it's got an understanding in English, and then it explains some of the key words. And it's beautiful. It's so simplistic. It's so beautiful that I finished it in a day. But something attracted me towards it. And I read it the second time. I read it a third time. And it's possibly over reading it multiple times that I realized that the Ashtavakra Samhita is a philosophical book or a philosophical text like no other. That's the impact it's created on me. Along with the Guru Sutra that's been written by Hingori, I think these are the two books that are right up there that changed my whole concept about existence. There are many books that inspire us. There are many books that give us an understanding. There are many books that help us practice certain spiritual doctrines. But if there's a text for self-realization that just tells you one point again and again and again through all its 20 chapters, it's the Ashtavakra Samhita. It tells you that the self is unattached, it's formless, and it's a witness to all that it experiences. And it tells you this right through. So my request to all of us present here would be that, let's not look at this session as something that one needs to make notes about. One needs to understand what Ashtavakra was all about. I think Dr. Akheja covered that so well in the previous presentation on the Ashtavakra Gita. This is a session which is equivalent to meditation. Like you rightly said, we hear, we reflect, we absorb, and we deep dive into ourselves. It doesn't matter whether we miss any words.
So true. So why do you think it is relevant to us? Why would you want to discuss this particular book?
Well, I think it's relevant to us because it's the single most powerful text that explains to us the concept of self-realization. It's not a fancy dialogue that came in that promo video which we shared, which said that the self is always realized. It is we who have to realize the self. The Ashtavakra Samhita takes us through an entire journey of understanding that there is nothing that we need to add and there is nothing that we need to subtract. Because we are that which is pure, the consciousness. And I think it's extremely relevant that in our own way, we should try and understand this to whatever extent that we can.
So true. So true. Devraj, would it be fair then to say that the Ashtavakra Samhita, is a text on non-duality?
I think it's the most profound text on non-duality. Um, you know, I didn't realize this until much later when we read a little more about the Ashtavakra Samhita, that um, it's a book that explains to you the concept of non-duality while giving a lot of respect to duality. So let's first look at it from the angle of non-duality. And there's this beautiful example in the Samhita of the mirror. I'm sure you must have heard it, but I think let's share it for the benefit of our audience today. Um, when you look into the mirror, what do you see? You see a reflection of yourself, correct? Do you agree with me, Anjali?
Yes, of course. Yes.
So, when you see a reflection of yourself in the mirror, does that change the whole experience of what the mirror is? It doesn't, right?
No, it doesn't.
The mirror still is the mirror. Can your reflection have any impact on the mirror?
Well, no.
The mirror will still remain the mirror, right?
Correct.
So too is the consciousness. So too is the self. The body and the mind, they would come and go through a multiple cycle of life and birth and death and whatever happens in the interim. But the self remains absolute, formless. It doesn't need to be bound, it doesn't need to be liberated. That's the concept of non-duality. And that self is within us and beyond us. But the beauty of Ashtavakra is, the beauty of his philosophy is that he teaches you to look at this also from the aspect of duality. Now, for a minute, let's look at all our experiences and how we look at the concept of duality today. So we believe in this concept of the creator, correct?
Yes.
So there's a creator who created this whole universe or this cosmos, which then becomes the creation.
True.
Are a part of this universe, a part of this cosmos. So we in some form have been created by the creation. Think about what I'm saying. That's how duality views it, right?
Absolutely.
What Ashtavakra explains to us, and it's beautifully explained while reading between the lines, without saying so in as many words, that if there is a creator who has created the world, the universe, which in turn has created us, and we are all a part of that same consciousness, then in a sense, are we not an essence of the world and hence an essence of the creator?
Profound.
So if we walk down this path throughout, inevitably we will come to the realization that the being that I am, and it's ironical when you say the statement I am, but for the sake of understanding, the being that I am is actually a localization of the being that is.
Wow. This reminds me of what Christian Humphreys, an author who wrote many books on Buddhism, said. The Western mind has lost the balance between the visible world and the unseen, the unoriginated, unformed, which was the Buddha's description of that which is ever changing, the ever changing universe. The balance is in the totality of things and in non duality, the beyond the relative. Such is man's concern, not to conquer life or bend it to his will, but rather than to live life as life lives itself. I just love this line: live life as life lives itself. Absolute and relative are one.
That's so. I recommend this to everyone present here that the toughest part about discussing about philosophy with respect to Ashtavakra is that once you've realized it, or once you attempted to realize it, it's very difficult to express or explain it.
So true. So true. So Devraj, yeah, so now here we have a huge lot of questions coming in. And there was this one question which is like, is, when you've explained Ashtavakra and non-duality, then is the self the Brahman or the Atman? What is the difference between the two?
So, I'll try and explain this as simply as I can. And actually, it may also be related to my unconventional understanding of it. And so, do correct me where I go wrong. But in my understanding, the Brahman is the indivisible self, the ultimate reality in which is manifested the entire universe, the entire cosmos. And the Atman is the ultimate reality that manifests in the self, what we really are, not what we think of ourselves, right?
Right.
Now, Anjali, if this is right, then think that we said the Brahman is the indivisible self, and the Atman is the ultimate reality manifested in the self. But can there be two ultimate realities?
No.
So if there can't be two ultimate realities, then the Brahman is equivalent to the Atman.
Wow, this is like a eureka moment. Beautiful. So what you are saying is that knowledge, the knower and the knowable, all these three do not exist in reality. They are one. So this is essentially the concept of aham brahmasmi. I am that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I am this stainless self in which the triad appearance is all through ignorance, right? Because I am that. I am, or Tattvamasi. Wow, really nice. Then, what then is the self? Is a question asked by Naina.
So, let me give you an example before we get into what is the self. So, think about something like a bonfire. Okay. You light up a bonfire. Most of us, if not all of us, have participated in a bonfire at some stage. I mean, sitting around a bonfire. So, if you light up a bonfire, then the bonfire is, let's look at the bonfire as the Brahman. Okay. And, as the bonfire gathers steam and you put whatever ingredients are required to light it up and, to have it running, sometimes momentarily you see a spark coming out from the bonfire, right? Momentarily, you'll just see a spark come out and go back in. I mean, I'm not saying this technically, but practically, I'm sure you would have experienced this. That spark is the Atman. So when you look at it from this background and from this example, and you look at it from what you explained about the knower, the knowledgeable, the known, then what is the self? The self is not the body and the mind. The self is the witness to all that it experiences, the consciousness. I mean, have you asked yourself a question that, have you ever faced a situation, Anjali, when your mind has gone blank? Has it ever happened to you?
Yes.
Yet, in that moment when you had this absence of thought, are you not aware that you had this absence of thought?
Very much aware.
So, what is that awareness? That is the consciousness. That is the self. I tell you, I did this simple experiment to try and convince myself after watching a YouTube video.
Okay.
That, you try and think of the self in the concept of space. So just take a simple jar. Okay, just say a pickle jar or whatever you feel like taking. And you open up that jar. And what happens? All the space, all the consciousness that's all around us, some part of it comes inside that jar, right? That space.
Absolutely.
And you shut the jar. Like how the jiva is in the body.
Mm-hmm.
when you open the jar again, or if the jar dismantles, or whatever you want to say, doesn't that space which is inside the jar become a part of the space which is the overall space?
It does.
So the consciousness of the self is a witness. It can't be differentiated from anything and doesn't need to be.
Fabulous. But here now there's a huge confusion. Okay.
Sure.
The thoughts. Then what about our thoughts? About us being aware of them, or is there any other way around? I mean, where does this fit in?
So, we discussed about how we are an observer and how we are a witness. That's the same way one has to look at thoughts. Just ask ourselves a question again. And it's very simple. We don't need to procrastinate on this point because we will just discuss the same concept. That's the beauty of the simplicity of what Ashtavakra teaches, despite the depth of what he teaches, that it all boils down to the same fact. So are you aware of your body?
Yes.
Or is your body aware of you? Which way is it?
Oh, now this is the confusion.
No,
Yeah.
so let's do an exercise. You tell yourself, look at your hand right now, okay, as we speak. And it's a very simple, it's a 30-second experiment.
I'm going to ask the audience here to put in their answer. Please answer the question. Let them also participate in this.
Sure. So you look at your hand. It's very simple, and you ask yourself a question. We don't need to answer each other right now immediately, but you just ask yourself a question that: are you observing your hand, or is it observing you? Okay, take 30 seconds. Let's not speak. Just ask yourself this question: are you observing your hand, or is your hand observing you?
Please do type in your answers here. As me or hand.
Now what you do is say hi. So who's going to wave? You're going to say hi. Who's going to wave? The hand, right?
Yes.
But who's given that thought to the hand to wave? Or who's the observer of that wave?
Right. So, me. So we're getting a lot of answers saying I'm observing the hand. It's me.
Yeah. So you are the witness, right?
Absolutely.
To all your observations, to all your thoughts. And there are stages and phases. So, this philosophy. One should never approach philosophy by grudging the stage and phase at which we are. Neither does one need to approach it with arrogance, nor does one need to approach it with an inferiority complex. Every stage and every phase is important. How did Ashtavakra? I would consider him one of the greatest sages to have ever lived. And it's ironical because Ashtavakra takes you beyond the concept of life and death. Yet, for the sake of simplicity, one says so. But I would consider him as one of the greatest sages because he took his disciple, King Janaka, towards the path of moksha. And we'll come on the concept of moksha later, but he took his disciple, Janaka, to the path of moksha. It's not easy for a king or an emperor who's got so many responsibilities, so many duties, so many people to look after, to actually achieve what Janaka did. But if Janak achieved what he did, it was only because of the guru he had in the form of Ashtavakra. So, what I'm trying to get at is that Ashtavakra took Janak through a whole stage and a phase of reaching that stage of self-realization. And at every stage, what you do then is extremely important to help you go to the next stage. There will come a stage, it has to come, and we'll discuss this right at the end. There will come a stage when, even your desire to become a part of the Brahman or to become even the Brahman dies away. Because that sense of separateness that you get is removed.
Fabulous. Sandhya Bhardwaj has a question here, Devraj. Why can't it be both observing each other? Because the consciousness that is within is flowing all over. So our hand is also is a part of our body in which also exists the consciousness.
That is true. That is true. So, that takes us back to the example of the space in the jar. I was watching National Geographic this morning with my dad, and there was this documentary going on India's wandering lions, and it was on the Gir forest. And to answer Sandhya's question, I got a thought when I was watching it. The lion was trying to hunt the deer, and he was doing this very stealthily. Now, the Gir forest, I mean, this is what I understood on National Geographic today, has a lot of dry leaves, as a part of its foliage. And as much as the lion tried stealthily to ensure he doesn't make any noise, because he touched the path on the dry leaf, the deer or the antelope got alerted and ran away. What does that mean? Even that dry leaf, I mean, if space has a consciousness, why not a dry leaf? But even that dry leaf has a consciousness. Consciousness is all around us, within, beyond, everything. Everything is observing you, you are observing it. But you are the observer, not the observed.
Right. But Devraj, I have a question here. Does that mean that we completely give up even contemplation and hold nothing in our minds? Is that the state, the state of the self, where you free yourself and you would do, what do you think, or do you think nothing?
It's a very tough question to answer, but I'll tell you how Ashtavakra would look at it. Ashtavakra his principal understanding is that the Atman is pure, right? The Atman is unattached. We discussed this.
Right.
We also discussed the fact that if the Atman is pure, unattached, if the Atman is equivalent to the Brahman, then there is no need to add and subtract to it, right?
Correct.
So then, what then Anjali is there to give up? Because you, the self, are unattached. You may not have realized you're unattached, but in essence, you, the self, are unattached. Vedanta philosophy has a very beautiful example. I was discussing this with Tara this evening. Vedanta philosophy says that, I forget in exactly as many words, but it says that, don't grasp at anything. Because, as you grasp, you too are caught.
Right.
Does that make sense? So let's look at this life, whether it's our friends, our family, all the possessions which we think are ours, we perceive to be ours. Through this cycle of life and death, they're all gone. Does any of it stick to us?
No.
And yet we spend our entire life in the mundane struggle of the body and mind.
So is the self unattached to all its experiences?
It has to be. Because you see, all the experiences, let's even look at the experiences that we do in our spiritual journey. Whether it's prayer, whether it's meditation, good deeds, seva, all of that, even what is explained to us in various spiritual doctrines, isn't that all leading to a further cycle of bondage? And the self is not bound. The self is not deficient. The self doesn't need to conjure any circumstance or any action or any reaction, because it doesn't need any virtue to make itself pure.
Beautiful. So what you're saying in essence is that we look upon the modifications of the elements as nothing in reality but the primary elements themselves, and you will at once be free from the bondage.
Well,
Not at once, of
there's
course.
there's a second part of bondage, which is liberation.
Okay.
And so let's
I
look.
have
Sorry.
I have a question here. I have a question here. Bondage consists of desires, and the destruction of desire is like what you said to be liberation, right?
Yeah.
Then does that mean that we should give up on spiritual practices?
Well, as much as I would like to say yes, I'm going to say no. Because, any practice that makes this life better, it should continue. But we should do this while realizing that all the experiences we have in this body and mind are transient. And we are a witness to them. So let's look at an example of copper. Okay. For those of us who have a copper vessel at home, periodically we polish that copper vessel, right?
Absolutely.
To keep it clean, to improvise it, or whatever, to ensure it's hygienic, to keep it simple. That's how I would say spiritual practices influence our life. Good deeds, seva, mantra vidya, self-worship. Now let's look at the copper kada that your guru and my guru gave us, this one here. Have you ever, Anjali, polished this copper kada?
No, I've never thought of it.
Why didn't you ever think of it?
There was never a need to.
So can we say because, it is pure, it can't be added, it can't be subtracted?
Absolutely.
So that's how we have to look at it. Every purpose, every practice, it has some meaning. And at some stage, you cross the Rubicon.
So spiritual practices is a medium to help us evolve as well, is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, and you touched upon a very beautiful subject of liberation, momentarily. And,
right.
Even what we discuss in the Hingori Sutras. So in the Hingori Sutras, we're discussing about how good deeds, how good karma, how being of service to others selflessly is so meaningful. One of the teachings which Gurudev has given us, and I would genuinely request everyone who would be interested in understanding his teachings and philosophy to actually go on his website, which explains all of this so beautifully, gurudevonline.com. I'll just request Anjali if someone could type it in. But what did Gurudev teach us? He taught us that, this whole journey from selfishness towards selflessness, right? The journey starts with selfishness, even the journey of seva, for most of us. And it moves towards selflessness. This journey, in a sense, is called karma yoga. But even this journey comes with its concept of bondage. Because you're constantly seeking liberation, constantly seeking moksha, constantly seeking salvation. At some stage, we hope that we get liberated, we become one with the Brahman, we become one with the Atman. That's what we discussed all this while, right?
Yes.
Now, when you look at it this way, and for a minute, again, just shut your eyes and think to yourself that in the concept and context of what Ashtavakra is explaining to us, isn't liberation as much an impediment to self-realization as bondage?
Yes.
Because if you're the realized self, where are you bound and where is the need to be liberated?
Correct.
It's a very deep philosophy. I never realized this until this evening that as you go deeper into this philosophy, where is there even the concept of mukti? Where is there even the concept of moksha?
Fabulous. Yeah.
There is no need for that to be there.
So then where are the elements? Where is the body? Where are the organs? Where is the mind? Where is the void? Where to is the despair? You know. So is there a world then, or is it an appearance, a beginning and an end, or what are the means to discovering this, Devraj?
See, honestly, I don't have the answer for this question. Um, I've not had any out of body experiences, or I have not done time travel. Maybe we all are time traveling right now, but unknown to this experience. But let's look at it in a very simple way. Um, even the Hingori Sutras speaks about this concept of I am not the doer, right?
Right.
So then action and inaction, I mean, in reality, inaction does not mean that we have to stop partaking in any physical activity. But it happens with the freedom of knowing that I am not the doer. That, you know, life and uh, death may imply change. And this is a very central doctrine of what Ashtavakra says. He says, life and death may imply change, but he who has realized the self is neither dead nor alive. So, there is no quest for understanding as to whether there is an appearance, or is there a universe, or is there ignorance, or is this all an illusion? Because it's this thought, when it begins, that starts this whole cycle of bondage, liberation, and karma.
Okay. Devraj, can I take you back a bit? There's a question here by Munali which says that if we are unattached, then are we responsible for our thoughts? How can we separate out our mind, self, and our thoughts?
So let me give a practical example for this. Or, we've heard this from sources, I'm sure so would you have, that Ashtavakra gave King Janaka a very good practical way of doing this. And I think that's what we should share with Monali and the rest of our audience. So, it's also, I feel, a very strong tool for detachment, where, you can do this simple exercise. That's what Ashtavakra taught Janaka, is what we've heard. That you sit or stand in one place and you look at a point around a foot away. Okay?
Yeah.
You look at a point around a foot away, and it can be the self or the realized self that you're looking at. And you keep focusing on that. You keep observing that. Do this when you're in your meetings, do this when you're having a shower, do this when you're at the dining table. Do it whenever you can. Over a period of time, you'll realize that you are the witness to your thoughts and not the thought. Just do this. Do this and write into us at Hingori Sutras. Let us know after you've done this for a couple of weeks as to whether that's made any difference to your understanding about thoughts and your ownership of thoughts or perceived ownership of thoughts. And I'm sure, Anjali, we can request Hingori to answer this with his insights.
Yeah, while we talk about that, I'd just like to put in that our email ID has changed for the moment. It is answers.hingorisutras@gmail.com. So if there are any spiritual questions you need, or any experience that you'd like to discuss, or any problems that you'd like to discuss, please do write to us at answers.hingorisutras@gmail.com. It will be put up in a while on the comments. Yeah, we'd be happy to have Hingori answer your questions. And from here, There's a thought that's come in here, while we're discussing this, Devraj. Does Ashtavakra believe in rebirth and reincarnation?
See, if you look at Ashtavakra's whole philosophy, there is no life, birth, and death. But the Vedanta order has studied this a lot in depth, and there's so much we can learn about Ashtavakra's philosophy from them. So much. It's an ocean. I don't know if you're aware, but the Ashtavakra Samhita was the book that Ramakrishna Paramhans gave Swami Vivekananda to read when he was going, I think, to give the discourse. And it was
right.
The central book of what Swami Vivekananda expounded. And in one of the books that I had read on Vedanta philosophy, there's this beautiful story about someone asking one of the Swamijis of the order that they said it in Hindi that Punarjanam hai ki nahi? Correct? That's our question, right?
Bilkul.
And the answer of the Swamiji, I mean, just as I read it, it was so profound, so simplistic, and the answer was that he said something like, Mahatma ji, jab janam hi nahi, to punarjanam kahe ka?
Fabulous.
So that's the central theme of what Ashtavakra means.
This takes me to another thought, Devraj. I read in the Ashtavakra, Ashtavakra says that never confuse yourself in this. You are knowledge itself, you are the Lord, you are the self, you are beyond nature. If you are all, do we still need a guru? What were Ashtavakra Samhita's views on the concept of guru?
I think, okay, let me share with you my practical understanding of it. Obviously, the guru is, someone who has walked the path, someone who's navigated the pitfalls, who has experienced this journey to self-realization. The guru is not someone who's an orator, even if that orator is highly distinguished and highly profound. And that doesn't take away from the expertise of the orator. But the guru is the embodiment of wisdom. And it is only a guru who can guide a disciple down this path. You and I have been fortunate to have had this guru in our life, to have had Gurudev in our existence. I'll take you back to a practical example that should hopefully explain this. Years back, I asked my guru, or rather, I shared this thought with my guru that, Guruji, I feel today that Gurudev, you and I are part of the same consciousness. And it was a scary thought, and yet I felt it was a thought that made me feel good. And I think he realized that it's necessary that we overcome even that feeling of feeling good. So he told me that, it's nice that you feel that way, but do you feel the same way about the ant, who's walking down on the floor? Or do you feel the same way when you see a spider's web anywhere around you? Or the same way when a mosquito comes to bite you? Or do you feel that way when you see a stone lying around, the same stone that you sit on? And he said the day you see that same consciousness in them is when you should come back and speak with me about this again. And it took time. And it's still a journey that's in progress, in transition. But over a period of time, you realize that the concept of consciousness, the concept of divinity, at the cost of sounding repetitive, is there all around us. And that realization, that concept can come only and only with the Guru's grace. I still remember. I still remember when we'd gone once to a place called Asthal. I'm sure you've gone there, so you'll know what I'm speaking about. But Asthal, for those of us on this session who don't know, for the benefit of them, Asthal is a place in Dehradun, in Uttarakhand, which in my view is one of the most spiritually energized places and pilgrimages that one should do at some point in their life. I'll request, I think I can't see Facebook while I'm on the screen, but I'm sure Rhythm would be there on this session, and I'll request him to share the location of Asthal for those who are interested. But the point here is that, when we went to Asthal, I met one of Gurudev's disciples by the name of Mohan Singh Chira. And while taking a walk with him to understand Gurudev's teaching and philosophy, and having never had the benefit of personally meeting Gurudev in the physical form, he shared with me a thought which has remained with me ever since. And that's the concept of the Guru, which even Ashtavakra says in different words. And he told me, he said that हमने ढूंढा जन्म जन्म गुरु न मिला कोई इस जन्म उद्धार हुआ गुरु ने ढूंढा मोहे.
Wow.
So you can't find your guru. It's only when destiny and your time comes that the guru finds you and leads you to that path of self-realization.
Guru bin gati nahi.
Completely.
Wow. So what is this life story all about then?
I think it's all about the mind. It always has been. All our likes, dislikes, our thoughts, our perceptions, our fears, all our characteristics, they're all of our mind. Because essentially, we the self are beyond all thought construct. I mean, we can expound on this, but it's the same point again and again and again.
So
I don't know if you feel that makes life purposeless.
I was just going to say that. So if all the modifications of the mind are destroyed, the man realizes that he himself is neither the doer nor the enjoyer. Wouldn't that make life purposeless?
In a way, it would. But then look at the other side of it. Look at it the way Ashtavakra would have looked at it. Ashtavakra says that the self is beyond action, beyond inaction, right? Ashtavakra never says that you cease to act physically or cease to partake in a physical or mental exercise. Ashtavakra says exactly what you said, that you do it without any form of attachment, without any form of attraction, without any form of aversion. So then, how would that be purposeless? I mean, it would be at one level, but look at where it's going to lead you.
So now the question comes, how do you overcome attachment to everything, to sense objects, to life, to relationships, to everything? How do you overcome attachments?
I think the most important thing is that don't grudge yourself. Believe that the time for transformation will come at its own pace, at its own stage. We discussed about detachment. Similarly, there's a concept called acceptance. In every situation in life, in every scenario in life, there are always two opposites, correct?
Yes.
There is joy, so there is sorrow. There is give and there is take. There is praise, and then there is slander. Don't people slander us all the time? There is pleasure and there is pain. Correct? There are always two opposite cases in all aspects of our life. Can we be accepting in both the opposites?
We should.
Can we maintain a sense of equilibrium? If we can do that, that is a very critical first step. Then over a period of time, you learn not just to stop ridiculing others, but also to ridicule yourself. It just ceases this whole desire, this whole concept. Even look at what we all love to say as, a very beautiful phrase or sentence that we all like to say, a sense of duty, right?
Yes.
But look at it the way Ashtavakra would look at it. And just as we discussed, don't grudge the fact that today you feel that there's a sense of duty. Look at it from the aspect of where Ashtavakra wants to lead you and me. Isn't this sense of duty also a virtue which in some way creates bondage? So over a period of time, let's try and overcome these things.
So is this one of the tricks to achieve self-realization, or are there more? Ask Ajay.
I'm sure there would be so many more, but uh, I, if you ask me the central trick towards achieving self-realization, then that is that don't strategize towards it. See, in the Hingori Sutras, and I realized this on reading the Ashtavakra multiple times, that in the Hingori Sutras, we speak about karmic credit and karmic debt, right? I think we have
Yes.
this spiritual, not IQ test. There's this one form that people
The
fill in
karma
the
quest.
Sutra, which is the karma quest, right?
Yeah.
Which explains to us where we are in this whole cycle of karmic credit and debt, right? Now, for a minute, and I really didn't realize this, think about what I'm saying, Anjali, and that's what I'm going to request the audience also, that even this whole cycle of karmic credit and debt, isn't it the result of the identification with the body and mind? Think about it. You don't need to give me an answer.
I'd
Isn't
like, in fact,
whole
I would request the audience to please answer it. If you think that it is the identification of the body and mind, please put in a yes. And if you think no, please put in a no. Please do type in your answers. In fact, Devraj, I would like them to also be a part of it and give what they
yes,
think.
yes, surely, obviously. So we'll take a 30-second break. I'll repeat this question. That this whole concept of karmic credit and debt, isn't this the result of the fact that we identify with the experiences of the body and the mind?
We're getting a lot of yeses as an answer. Yes,
Perfect.
as an answer.
That's what I also answered. And I realized this on reading the Ashtavakra Samhita, that, that eureka moment that we've all been searching for, that beautiful word called karma mukti. In a moment, freedom from this identification to the body and mind, freedom from this identification to karmic credit and debt, then wouldn't this be the key to karma mukti? The desire,
Yes.
the effort to seek liberation, the desire and the effort to get out of bondage, this whole concept of duality ceases to exist. And that is karma mukti, is what I just recently have begun to understand.
So then, what are the qualities that can help us that help identify, one who has realized his self? So how would you know that you have sort of realized the self?
I got this understanding by observing my guru. So many of us, let's not get into how many of us, but the central theme of our existence is the concept of desire, right? The desire to get out of bondage, the desire to be liberated, the desire to do our duty, the desire to possess worldly, goods, so on and so forth. And, when I observed the Guru, I realized that one can be completely desireless and one can enact an emotion without experiencing it. That is the realized self.
Some think that existence is, the others that nothing is. Rare is the one who thinks neither. So when the self is realized, does one exist or not?
It's a very, 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 very good question. Ashtavakra explains this beautifully. And if you catch it the first time, I think it's wonderful. I didn't catch it for a long time. Ashtavakra says that the body doesn't just drop off necessarily when the self is realized. And it's not that the self is realized at a stage when the body drops off, right? Because we are beyond the cycle of birth and death, right? As per Ashtavakra. But what he brings forth importantly is that even the existence is as good as non-existence, because there is, till you reach that stage of self-realization, over the course of time, there is this prarabdha karma, right, that you have accumulated.
Right.
Now that has to get exhausted, correct? For that to get exhausted, you have to live out this experience. The difference will be, as per Ashtavakra, and he's so right in saying so, that you will live out this experience without having any ego or any motive. And once this prarabdha karma is over, everything ceases to exist and there is no need for any explanations.
Oh, wow. So that's where it is. Where
I mean, we'll go over this for hours and hours and we'll come back to the same. That's the beauty of Ashtavakra. Hats off.
So that says, then I have just one last question.
Sure.
Have you realized the self?
Let me flip it to you. Have you realized the self, Anjali?
No.
Then how can I? We just discussed this entire hour that we are the universe and we are the self. So if you've not realized the self, then how can I?
For you and I are one. Fabulous.
There's no other.
Very nice. It is if there are any more questions, I'm sure Devraj would be happy to answer. So please do type in. I think we've covered most of the questions that have come in.
I think the one thing which we should surely share this, and it's a very, very, very relevant thought. And which is that, and this is something that I learned from the Guru, that, Gyan, what are we discussing all through these Hingori Sutra weekly, every Sunday sessions? We're trying to, what's the spiritual laboratory all about? It's about a lesson for life. It's about Gyan, correct?
Yes.
What is Gyan? Gyan, as you understand the concept of Ashtavakra, is not the desire for knowledge. Gyan, it's actually the realization of the self. That what जो हमें एक you and I या आप और हम एक जो द्वैत का जो भाव रहता है, उससे जो हमें जिस चीज से हमें एक जो एक ऊर्जा देता है, ज्ञान is that vidya. It is that realization of the self. And when the complete dissolution of the ego happens, at that stage, there is no desire to even express or to prove or to gather and understand that you have realized the self.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to sum up. And I think the only other aspect that I firmly believe in, without contradicting Ashtavakra's philosophy, is that while there is no other, and I know we've discussed this a few minutes back, but while there is no other, and while it's an indivisible self, yet this gyan and this realization is impossible without the grace of a guru. And I think fortunate are those who have the grace of a guru to walk down and attain this realization. I think that's what makes this existence worth it.
Absolutely. There's one question here, Devraj, which said, is there a purpose of our physical form then?
So, the answer for that is in what we discussed earlier, that we have a certain amount of prarabdha karma, right? Which has to exhaust itself. And for that, we have to live out our experiences. And the body and the mind is a conduit for doing that. So long as we are, however, identifying with the body and mind, and maybe today it's not in our hands to overcome this identification, it will happen over a stage, so be it. Till then, the body and mind definitely has a purpose. But let it serve its purpose. Why be attached to where that purpose leads us and how far it is reached?
Lovely. And I think to end this, there's another phrase I learned from the Ashtavakra Gita is, where is knowledge and where is ignorance? Where is I? Where is this? And where is mine?
Right.
Sorry, where is bondage and where is liberation? Where is an attribute to the nature of myself? Okay. When I am not there. Or rather, I am one. I think this is something that if we can all reflect upon, absorb, I'm sure is going to make a big difference to us tonight when we sleep. Yeah. So thank you,
It's
Dev.
like the sun, the sun doesn't need a torch to know it's illuminating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, dear audience, and we look forward to another enlightening session next week. We have a session on Ode to Guru Dev by another member of Team Hingori Sutras, and that is surely going to be a fabulous session on the concept of what a guru means and where a guru can take you in life. So see you next week. Good night. Shubh Ratri.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.